Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Australasian Public Library Conference 2025. My name is Simon Wakeling. I'm an academic at Charles Sturt University, and I'm also chair of the conference organising committee. It's lovely to see so many of you here on a Monday morning. I'm looking forward to the next few days. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wiradjuri people, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which I'm based here in Bathurst. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and to all First Nations people here today. Now, it won't take too long. This is just a quick intro to the conference. We've got three speakers lined up already for this session. I don't want to take up their time. I just wanted to say that this conference has been organised by the Libraries Research Group, the LRG at CSU, and we're an interdisciplinary group involved in research in libraries of all types in Australia and internationally. And this year also marks the 50th anniversary of Library and Information Studies teaching at CSU. So we wanted to mark that occasion as well as all the work that the LRG group and others around Australia and New Zealand have been doing by bringing together researchers and practitioners working on and in public libraries, which we all know are hugely important to communities across Australia and New Zealand. So the conference is going to run over 3 days. We've got 2 sessions each day, a 10 o'clock session and a 2 o'clock session. All these sessions will be recorded. We're going to host them all on a YouTube channel, and I will be emailing out to all registrants to the conference, emailing out links to those recordings at the end of the week. So without too much further ado, I just want to quickly thank the conference organising committee who've been working with me over the last 6 months or so to pull this event together. So that's Philip Hyder, Jane Garner, Casey Garrison, Anita Dewey, Holly Randall Moon, Hamid Jamali and Elise Rosser. So thanks all for coming. I hope we have an interesting and engaging few days, and I'll hand over now to Professor Philip Hyder, who's going to be chairing this first session.
Thanks very much, Simon. So yes, I've got 2 parts. We've got another plenty of time, I think. Just let a few more people come in. Anyone still there in the waiting room? I don't think so. So I'm Philip Hyder. Simon says I'm Professor of Library Information Management here in the School of Information Communication Studies at CSU, Charles Sturt University. Also co-leader of the Libraries Research Group, as Simon says. We're hosting this conference, our first public library conference, so very exciting for us and hopefully for everyone. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the peoples of the Kulin Nation. So for the conference's first session, we have 3 wonderful researchers coming from different parts of the world, and they'll each be presenting on various aspects of the session's theme, which is nice and broad. It's namely the role and function of public libraries. So something that's becoming ever more multifaceted, both in Australia and overseas, as no doubt the presenters will illustrate. After each of the presentations, about 20 minutes or so, there should be enough time, about 5 minutes or so, for a few questions and answers. So please do put any questions or comments that you have in the chat for us to relay to the presenter on your behalf. So I think can't see anyone else in the waiting room, don't think. So I think it's time to begin. So first up, we've got Dr. Africa Hans, whose presentation is entitled "The Community's Swiss Army Knife on the Nimbleness of Public Libraries." Dr. Hans is Assistant Professor of Information Science at the University of Buffalo, New York. Her research examines public library access in marginalized populations, information access in higher education settings, and first-generation student experiences. She's the author of Successfully Serving the College Bound, published by ALA Editions. So I think without further ado, I'll welcome Dr. Hans to share her presentation. Thanks very much, Africa.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here with you all. I trust that you can see the slides okay. Great, got a thumbs up. That's what we need. Thank you. So first, I want to thank, of course, Professor Philip Heider for the invitation to present at your inaugural conference. This is very exciting to be here with you all. And I also want to thank the conference organizing committee, as well as the library research group at Charles Sturt University. I'll start with a brief overview of what I will talk about today. I'll start with a brief sketch of public libraries in the United States, speaking to the nimbleness of public libraries in the United States. I also acknowledge that some of the examples that I will give are not unique to U.S. libraries. And so I look forward to learning about what's happening in public libraries in the Australasian area through the other presentations. I'll also talk a bit about higher education in the United States, and then lead into my research on public library support of college literacy. And then, as Philip mentioned, there is, of course, time for discussion and your questions after that. So when we think about public libraries, they have long moved from solely providing access to just books. And I think of this in terms of kind of a Swiss Army knife metaphor, thinking about the nimbleness of public libraries. We know that public libraries have long provided early education services and early literacy services and programming for children. Small libraries also serve as small business incubators in the United States. Libraries such as the Appleton Public Library in Wisconsin host small business fundamentals types of workshops and academies for people who are starting their small businesses. So they offer workshops on marketing and leadership and getting your finances together for your small businesses. Libraries also support their communities through workforce development. So this might come in the form of career-related workshops and maybe partnering with organizations to offer certification courses for different types of industries. Public libraries especially, are well integrated into health and wellness and providing workshops of that nature to members of their communities. And we're also seeing public libraries as community anchors. One example of that is San Francisco Public Library, which was in the United States, which was the first public library to offer social work staff in the library. And now we are seeing that worldwide, including in Australia. I believe it's Melbourne that has started having a social worker in the public libraries. We also see public libraries serving in natural disasters. For example, during the pandemic, libraries were instrumental in keeping people online through the offering of Wi-Fi access. We see public libraries also very well integrated in the lives of senior citizens in our communities, offering programs and enrichment activities to keep our senior communities very active. So in my research, because I have a background in higher education and public libraries, I look at all the areas of services and offerings at public libraries and think, well, why not college literacy? Why not offer intentional services to people who are looking to further their education? Supporting college-bound patrons of all ages is, of course, an important role for public libraries. And in the United States in particular, we have a classification of college students that we call some college, no degree. Now, this isn't an official designation. It's used by researchers to identify individuals who have started their college careers but stopped out for whatever reason. And I see this particular population of students as one that is very ripe for public libraries to help with their college degrees. Sorry about that. So in this some college, no degree credential category, we have about 40 plus million individuals who can meet that category of individuals in the United States. There is a private foundation focused on higher education attainment called the Lumina Foundation in the United States. And in 2008, they started an initiative called Stronger Nation. And they had a goal, they set a goal that by 2025, 60% of adults will have obtained a college degree or credential. And so over the course of the years from 2008 to 2025, we have seen an increase in college degree attainment from 38% when the initiative started to 55% in the United States. Now, the Lumina Foundation has a new initiative called Stronger Nation, Credentials of Value. And in that initiative, the goal has increased a bit. So by 2040, the year 2040, they are looking at 75% of adults will have obtained degrees or credentials of value, leading to economic security and economic prosperity. Now, we know that there are gaps still, even though we've seen an increase based on the Lumina reports, we've seen an increase in college attainment. There is still progress to be done. There's still attainment gaps in who receives college education, who doesn't. And I'll share some of that data with you shortly. But I want to start with this quote from Laura Perner, who writes that closing the gaps in attainment requires a comprehensive approach that recognizes the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. This comprehensive approach must recognize the importance of improving college affordability, academic readiness, information, and support for college students. And I think public libraries should be counted among those stakeholders, as they are trusted information providers in our communities. Some of the, some of the information gaps that prospective students experience may be attributed to what we call the hidden curriculum in higher education. The hidden curriculum includes the unexpected and unwritten expectations and norms that we see across higher education. The hidden curriculum also includes the undocumented processes and rules of engagement that we expect students to know when they start education. It includes academic jargon, sometimes professional jargon, terms that just may not be familiar with new students, but that also are not very well explained by people who work in higher education, because it's sometimes expected that students know these terms already. In the United States, this includes terms like the bursar's office, which is where people go to pay their registration bills, which is confusing because there's also a registrar's office and a financial aid office. So terms like that contribute to this attainment gap, because students get lost in the shuffle there because they just don't know exactly how to access the information and the resources that they need to finish their college degrees. And this is particularly felt by students who are first generation students, which in the United States are students whose parents did not earn a college degree. It also impacts international students and, again, returning adults, folks who are coming back after stopping out their college degrees. According to the Public Needs for Library and Museum Services survey, 44% of adults responded in the affirmative to going to the library to support formal education or career development. So here we see that people are already using the library to further their formal education goals. And in my research and advocacy, I would love to see more intentional direct services and programming to support college-bound patrons, because this does align with existing programs in ways that patrons are using the public library. So this is where my research comes in. My research project called Public Library Support of College Literacy in Appalachia is funded by IMLS. It was an early career development project. And in this research, I'm looking at how public libraries in a particular region of the United States are serving the needs of college-bound patrons, how they are supporting college literacy for prospective students. In this research, I define college literacy as the literacy or knowledge base needed to make informed decisions about one's entry into higher education. So this research concerns the area called Appalachia in the United States, which is the region in color on the map here, and particularly I'm looking at Central Appalachia, which is contains parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. These states serve over 3 million library users in a year. And so intentional provision of information and services to support college literacy could have potentially wide-reaching impacts for the diverse communities in this area. According to the literature, prospective students in Appalachia face barriers in advancing their higher education, sometimes due to academic underpreparedness or lack of information about college and financial aid. Students in this region also earn college degrees at a rate of 7% below the United States average. And in Central Appalachia in particular, the rate of attainment of bachelor's degrees and the median household income is lower than other regions of Appalachia. And unfortunately, the unemployment is higher than other areas of Appalachia. We also know that from the literature, non-traditional students in particular face challenges to information seeking, including time constraints, discomfort asking for help, and also discomfort with technology. And so in my research and advocacy, I see the library as a space where some of these needs can be met. And also my work aims to support students like the one quoted here, who's from Appalachia and now a college professor. And in his chapter in the book, Rereading Appalachia, he wrote that my parents were clueless. I was clueless. We didn't know whether I was supposed to take the ACT, the SAT, or both. We were clueless but determined to figure it out. He goes on to write that for most first-generation college students in rural Appalachia, the process for preparing and transitioning into college life is fraught with anxiety and indecision. So in my research, the first phase was a website content analysis. And in this content analysis, myself and my graduate student, we examined 89 college websites that represented about 150 public libraries. We were looking for what types of college-related events and programs the libraries offered, what types of resources or databases were offered that lead to some of the library databases have test prep programs or career prep programs to help people decide about their college paths. We were also looking at links and whether the public libraries had links to two-year colleges or four-year colleges in the area. And we were also looking at the audience, whether the information was geared towards teens or young adults or the general population of library users and people in the community. Unfortunately, what we found is that not a lot of libraries are doing this intentional programming. Not a lot of libraries have events or programs. There were just 3 libraries that we found that hosted any events or programs related to college planning. Also, the audience of the information skewed toward the teen or young adults. So that kind of goes in line with people thinking only about students coming directly from high school going to college. So not really looking at that some college, no degree area of people who may be working adults who are going to college. In phase 2 of the research, I conducted a survey of public library staff, and one question in particular asked people to describe what they thought was the role of public libraries in serving college-bound patrons. And for this, we did a qualitative analysis of the data, and 3 themes that I picked out from that data were that people saw the role of the library as one of being a connector, of providing technology, and of being a supporter of college-bound patrons. And here we have some sample responses from library staff. So we have library staff talking about the public library being a partner with schools or colleges to provide programs. Excuse me. Public libraries providing support through the databases and test prep databases, and also providing access to financial aid resources, which are online nowadays for students. Also, public library staff saw them as being a vital resource to their communities by providing free internet access. And then there's other comments related to just being generally supportive of people who are looking to further their college education. Then there were responses that I consider to be the others can help kind of perspective to the role of public libraries for this particular population. And so some of the quotes from folks who had that perspective thought that because the higher education system is a bit cumbersome, it's the government's responsibility to make higher education information accessible to the community. Or another person said that because the library is close to major universities, then the university library can help prospective college students. And another person thought that the high schools would be the primary resource for college-bound teens. Then we had one respondent who had a decidedly limited view of public libraries, definitely not an example of the nimbleness of public libraries. And this person thought that public libraries should focus almost exclusively on literacy, library instruction, and information retrieval. In the 3rd phase of the research, I interviewed current students. So I talked to 8 current students who are in undergrad. Those students were studying mostly in Kentucky and in Virginia. They were a mix of first-generation students and continuing generation students between the ages of 18 and 25. So one of the questions I asked the students was about their information needs. What information do they need about college to make informed decisions? And unsurprisingly, it's money. Students need to know how to navigate financial aid, how to apply for financial aid, as well as all the various scholarships that are available. Excuse me. Students also needed information about how to compare multiple offers. So they're looking at different financial aid packages and wanting information on how to make reasonable comparisons between those offers. Here in the United States, we have some admissions decision options that include early action or early decision, and students needed information to know what the difference is between those 2 decisions when you are accepted to college. Also, another area of need was the unique features of a university. For example, whether a university had an honors college or specialty programs that were of interest to the students based on their majors. Here are some quotes from current students that offer a glimpse into their information needs during the application process. So again, we have financial aid offers. It was really difficult to tell what you were paying for. And in that regard, students were kind of confused about other tuition and fees that were applied to their financial bill. Students were also interested in knowing more about the scholarships that they were applying for. And then one student wasn't sure about the entrance exam scores and who they even send those scores to. These are all needs at the informational level that could be addressed by public libraries. In terms of information sources, family was an information source for both first generation and continuing generation students. Students also look to their friends for a lot of this information, and then also interestingly, the parents of their friends. So if they had a friend whose parents had gone to college, they might get some advice and information from that individual about their college plans. They also, of course, used search engines, just doing general searches online for information about colleges, and then also college websites. Unfortunately, few students reported using the public library as an information source when they were looking for college-related information. So with that in mind, I did ask students what suggestions they have for public libraries. And here are two quotes from students. One student said, I think it would have been more helpful if there was a set list. For example, a set list of reputable colleges. The student goes on to say, so maybe that's a place a library could help, like helping with research. When they were looking at different colleges and different lists of like the best colleges, the student was thinking, how do I know these lists are legit? So that's kind of an information literacy sort of skill related to college planning that libraries could help with. Another student said, I would just say, send in a person, give a presentation or something. Using the library never crossed my mind, but it would have maybe if they brought in someone who worked at the public library, in this case to their high school, to talk about the different resources and services available related to college planning. So in terms of the nimbleness of public libraries and this research, we see that of the libraries examined, few, unfortunately, are offering college literacy support. We also see that staff report that there is a potential role for libraries to support college literacy, and that students experienced information needs that were in line with existing services offered by public libraries. So with that, I say yes, college literacy is a role that can be taken up by public libraries, and the nimbleness of public libraries, the responsiveness that we see in public libraries and other areas can include support of college literacy. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions and also hearing more about if this is an information source that could be provided in the libraries across Australia as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Africa. Yes, it's all virtual here, so you just have to imagine the very big round of applause. It was a great presentation. So let's see if there's anything in the chat. Can't see anything at the moment. Still got time to put a question to Africa at this stage. I can definitely relate to what you're talking about in terms of academic jargon, Africa. And we do have Bursa's office in Australia. I still don't know what they are. So if I don't, probably no one else does, particularly the people wanting to go to college. So a new form of literacy for me, college literacy, but clearly, as you as you say and demonstrate, a really important one for public libraries to work on. Just some comments there, I think.
Yeah, I do see one question,
Yes.
recommendations for supporting collaborations between high school libraries and public libraries. Well, I think that's could be kind of seamless. We know that school libraries are doing some of this work. I like to think of it as the public library and the school library working together to meet these needs. In the United States, they have college counselors in high schools, but they also have caseloads of hundreds of students. And so this could be an opportunity for a school librarian to partner with a public librarian, thinking that the school librarian, particularly in a high school, will see students at all the different grade levels. So there could be, and there are lots of resources available, particularly probably also in Australia, but in the United States, there are resources that do a scaffolded sort of approach to learning about college. And so it doesn't have to be gathering everyone to learn all at once. There are resources that talk about, so if you are a freshman in high school, these are things that you should be thinking about. If you're in a junior in high school, this is a time when you're starting to take the entrance exams and the practice entrance exams. So there could be a scaffolded sort of information approach that both a public librarian and a school librarian work with together to think about this issue. Someone else added about university libraries. We are seeing more partnerships in general around academic libraries and public libraries. So I see this as and it will take a bit of advocacy, and that's some of what I've been doing, is just to add this to the services and the information that's already being provided. In an academic library, many times they are the information source. So for current students, this could be working with the other offices on campus to learn about information that is relevant to students. So by that, I mean to learn about registration deadlines and how students might go about choosing their classes, because in many cases, in some cases, the librarians and the library staff see students more than other sort of staff that are across campus. So I see it as just learning a little bit more about what's happening at your academic campus, and then providing that information to library staff. This could also be something that is a peer sort of relationship, because you have library workers in your academic libraries who are college students. So they can also be an information source for library staff as well as the students in the library who may not know some of the college processes. So I see it as kind of a, could be more of a public awareness sort of campaign that could happen on academic library campuses in terms of the academic library, and then also with the school library. It's just kind of broadening the scope of information that the individuals know about different areas.
Thanks, Africa. We've got a couple of comments there, one from Catherine, one from Yasmin. Yes, the partnerships question was going to be my question. Casey and her colleagues have been doing quite a bit about on school public library partnerships more generally in Australia, but
Right.
sounds like that there's plenty more that can be done there.
Right.
And
Yeah,
with
I see there's a kind of a gap there. There's libraries are really good at the early literacy, as Casey says in the comment, and we also see libraries really good at lifelong learning and seniors and activities and things like that. But there's this group in the middle that need attention as well, and so it's a bit bit more work to get public libraries on board and to see this as a service like many of the others that I named. So like health and wellness, like small businesses, why not the folks who are going to college? And definitely, as Kirsty says, presentation is about the financial costs and the other subsidies. In some cases, I don't necessarily expect librarians to become college counselors, but that's where the partnerships come in. So if you're a public library, you can invite in the admissions counselors or the financial aid counselors, because people are coming to the library anyway. It's a natural meeting place. So why not bring that information to people in the public library? Let it be a setting for these conversations, and they can bring in people from universities to have these conversations with people.
Perfect. Yeah, excellent. So yes, similar kinds of comments in the chat there about this gap, and how we can plug it by bringing people in and so forth. So maybe I'll let you reply to any more questions we get in the chat, Africa, if that's okay. So I think thanks again so much. It was really interesting and definitely something for lots of people here to think about. So a new kind of literacy for me. And we better thank you. Move on to the second presentation is from someone who unfortunately can't be here. She wanted to come, but unfortunately she just can't make it now, but she's very kindly pre-recorded her presentation. So with a bit of luck, I'll play it in a minute. But first of all, I'd like to introduce her. So her name is Dr. Salene Schloffel-Armstrong, and she's a feminist political geographer whose work is concerned with collective resources, public good, and the possibility of envisaging alternative just futures. She has written extensively about libraries as forms of social infrastructure, but is also involved in research on housing futures, dark skies as nocturnal commons, and futures of bioprotection in Aotearoa. She is a founder member of the Politics, Economics, Place Research Group based at the University of Auckland, and is currently a co-chair of the Australasian Early Career Urban Research Network. So her presentation is entitled The Public Library and the Futures of Social Infrastructure, and with a bit of luck, I'll be able to play it, with a bit of luck. So hopefully everyone can see that. Thumbs up, you can see that. Yep, let's see.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Salene ho. Good morning to all of you. My name is Salene Schloffel-Armstrong. Thank you for having me here today to speak to you about public libraries. I'd like to begin first by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which this conference is being held today, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I am filming this video from the Centre of Tāmaki Makaurau in Aotearoa. I'm currently working here as a postdoctoral research fellow at both Waipapa Taumaterau, the University of Auckland in Tāmaki Makaurau, and Te Whare Wānaka o Aorake, Lincoln University in Rikona. So just to begin, a quick disclosure that I am not a library worker or a scholar of library information science, like a lot of you, but I am a lifelong library user, and I think about myself now in relation to my work as a feminist political geographer. So my own work is concerned with collective resources, public good, and the possibility of envisaging alternative and more collective futures. So I've written about libraries as a form of social infrastructure, but I'm also involved in research on housing futures, dark skies as nocturnal commons, and the future of bioprotection in Aotearoa. So my PhD thesis itself investigated the changing form and function of the public library in Aotearoa as a means to try and speak more broadly to the way we imagine the futures of our cities and the ongoing provision of public services. So the research that I did explored the library as this kind of mundane site of care and social reproduction in the city that might illustrate some already partially existing alternatives to our current political and economic systems. But don't worry, you don't have to hear about the whole thesis today. What I'm going to talk about today is specifically about this concept of social infrastructure in relation to the library, but from the perspective, very much from the perspective of a geographer. So today I'll reflect on the future of the public library as a way to illustrate what might be next for research on sites or spaces labelled as social infrastructures. A lot of what I reflect on here is also discussed in my commentary, shown here for Dialogues in Human Geography, which has the same title as the talk if you're interested. So I find the public library really useful for thinking through the future of infrastructure, as there has always been kind of this ongoing focus on future-proofing the library as partially at least a self-protective measure to ensure the institution's ongoing survival. So just to start with here, my own interest in libraries began as a young child, constantly overwhelmed with the endless choices of reading directions available for me at my local branch. But it wasn't until 2017 that it grew into a research interest, as I became involved in, as seen here, protests at the University of Auckland against the closure of a number of incredible small specialist academic libraries. So concurrent with these protests, I was also, as part of the end of my degree in geography, undertaking a small project about the Central Library in the northern city of Whangarei. And I was amazed at the liveliness of this library and its apparent centrality within the broader community. So from that point onwards, with these two intersections, my interest grew and grew until it had me starting a PhD to examine the library from a geographical standpoint in 2019. So for other geographers, the library had been kind of this very niche research interest until about that time as well, when the public library started to establish itself as this poster child example of this concept of social infrastructure. So since that time, geographers and other theorists and scholars have undertaken research from outside library information science, library studies. They've undertaken research attempt to understand some of this broader context around this changing form of the contemporary public library. So Shannon Mattern in 2007 argued that the public library was in the midst of this ongoing identity crisis. And other geographers have theorized similar things around what's happening. So the broader context, as sketched out in geography, is that over the last 30 years, public library systems across the global north have confronted these numerous waves of defunding and privatization. Attempts to close or privatize library buildings were seen as this inevitable response to the growing accessibility of information due to the digitization of collections, the expansion of access to the internet, and a general trend towards the privatization of public space and social services across the board. So the physical presence itself of the library was imagined by some of the public as a reality soon to be lost to history. And this narrative has often also conveniently aligned with political programs of fiscal conservatism and at times severe austerity to support this downscaling of library systems in many places. So in the UK, in 2018 alone, nearly 130 libraries were either closed or passed from local government to other organisations in processes of privatisation or voluntarisation. Despite this, and in fact, basically because of this, the various social functions a library provides beyond their traditional book lending role really became a focus of both popular and academic discourse around the global north. So these threats to the demise of the physical library branch have not played out evenly in all places, with an increased interest in their social worth as material spaces occurring as well. So this renewed attention is due in part to the noticeable absence of community space and access to social services that appears after the removal of local libraries and disinvestment in other forms of community infrastructure. So nonetheless, kind of at odds with the shrinkage that's seen of many library systems, a new wave of library branch construction has really embraced these changing perceptions of the library as a place of numerous and varied social functions. So significant resources have been funneled into the construction of these flagship libraries in the central business districts of numerous cities across the global north. So in addition to book lending, these libraries are access points for various social services, seen as public meeting places, extended cafe zones, as well as often being architectural tourist attractions in their own right. So this trend of flagship library construction can be seen clearly across Scandinavia and extends further across the globe, with key examples that have emerged in North America, Australia, and in Aotearoa over the last 3 decades, including for us Turanga in Christchurch and Ōtautahi. So the complexity of these uneven and opposing trends are clearly spatial in nature and are connected to wider processes of restructuring that are currently occurring in urban space. So as an institution, the public library is seen as taking on these additional functions and responsibilities, whether by circumstance or design or a mixture of both, with the materiality of their physical branches becoming an increasingly integral part of everyday life or survival for many communities. So the restructuring and reorganization of public spaces, social service provision, and spaces of community and care are both implicated in and achieved through the space of the public library. Library systems in countries such as the Netherlands and Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, are retooling their branches and services as a way of further emphasizing their broader social functions. So in the midst of this shifting landscape, many libraries have really actively embraced this language of social infrastructure as a way to help explain the vital and varied roles they play within their communities. So what is the social infrastructure? What is social infrastructure? It's a term I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It has a lot of popular purchase, and you may already use it in specific ways in relation to libraries yourselves. So a quick theoretical history of social infrastructure from my perspective can be explained as such. Basically, social science has experienced a huge infrastructural turn in the last 10, 15 years. From starting with this really materially focused interest in the traditional hard infrastructure seen here, such as roads or pipes, research has really broadened to pay attention to the social, relational, and affective dimensions of infrastructure. So inquiries into infrastructures now include research on phenomena as varied as global digital platforms, rivers as forms of border infrastructure, effective infrastructures, even debating the extent to which people themselves can be considered forms of infrastructure. This growing popularity of theorizations of infrastructure has led to some concern that the concept may have lost some of its useful specificity. Despite this scrutiny, infrastructure continues to have this popular purchase as a means of drawing attention to kind of specific processes and relations within our worlds. So in 2002, sociologist Eric Klinenberg expanded on the idea of third places in his research about a deadly Chicago heatwave to develop a specific theorization of social infrastructure. So his famed conceptualization of social infrastructure mentions the public library as a place of sociality but only in passing. So arguing that public institutions such as libraries, schools, playgrounds, parks, athletic fields, and swimming pools are vital parts of the social infrastructure. For media scholar Shannon Mattern, she noted that libraries have long played this role within their communities. She argues that, in short, the library has always been a place where informational and social infrastructures intersect within a physical infrastructure that ideally supports that program. So this birth of social infrastructural scholarship also builds upon the theorization of third places by Oldenburg and Brissett. For them, the third place is described as a site between the home as the first place and work, which is the second, that operates as an informal space of sociality and encounter. This original theorization described places like bars, general stores, cafes, town squares. For Oldenburg and Brissett, the third place was an increasingly important site in the United States urban landscape as more public space was privatized, and these places continued to lose centrality in people's everyday life. So since the initial emergence of this term, numerous scholars have described a myriad of different spaces in the library, in the city, as potential third places, including the library. So on this background, and from Eric Klinenberg's theorization, in the last 5 to 10 years in particular, geographical research on these sites of sociality has blossomed, with the library featuring as an example of these processes. So these sites of sociality can be understood as spaces where, among other things, relations of care unfold between people. So as these broader landscapes of care provision have shifted, the importance of these sites of social encounter and support have been increasingly recognized within popular discourse. And the distinct repatterning of these landscapes of care provision has resulted in non-traditional locations taking up this work of care. So yet, a shrinkage of these sites, number of sites, has also occurred within this broader repatterning, providing even more pressure on the spaces left where people can access care informally and encounter each other in public. So these myriad processes have influenced the expansion of research on social infrastructure and its day-to-day importance in people's lives. So representing the library as a form of social infrastructure has been really tactically useful, among lots of other things. So framing the library as a social infrastructure has drawn attention to the specific qualities that the library often possesses, including how it facilitates opportunities for sociality and community cohesion across disparate groups. So in particular, it offers up a language that illustrates how the vital roles of the contemporary public library beyond book lending are often forgotten or marginalized until that service disappears and the social ties and the various services it provided have vanished alongside it. So in this sense, the library can be imagined as an infrastructural system, one that is not noticed well or valued well as it holds together and continues to work in the background until the point of rupture or breakage. So this framing has highlighted how a library's value to its community is often noticed on a broader scale only after the infrastructure is disturbed due to forms of privatization, defunding, and closure. And more recently, these geographers have been investigating how libraries and librarians themselves are actively embracing this language, but also the practices of social infrastructure as a way to further transform public libraries. So Van Malik and Merry in the Netherlands describe the conscious effort of libraries to retool themselves as forms of social infrastructure. So that's an active embrace of social infrastructure as this contemporary ideal for the public library. And it aligns with claims that see this change as, in some senses, an attempt to really maintain relevance in a changing world. Van Malik and Merry also drew attention to the implications of the changed circumstances since the pandemic. So the pandemic as a threat to this new perception of the library and its increased focus on in-person, in-place social activities among communities. Van Malik and Hazelegger in turn describe what they call infrastructuring practices of librarians as the means in which libraries are attempting to undertake these transformations. So their research draws attention to the work of making libraries operate as social infrastructures through the daily labour of librarians and a wider group of stakeholders. So social infrastructure as a concept offers a theoretical framing for some of the changes and tensions unfolding around contemporary library services. Within my own research, which was focused on the public's understanding of the future of central library buildings in Aotearoa, I found that a central tension emerging within the public perception of libraries in Aotearoa was really specifically around their social infrastructural functions, making the library's role as a space of sociality the key source of debate about the future of library systems. So these tensions emerged around the retooling library and its social roles and broader value in the city, and they were seen in particular in debates over either the prominence or lack of prominence of books, and then the place of the more than book services within the institution. And the balancing act required by the library in the years to come was clearly around, partially at least, how to handle this evolving idea of social infrastructure, how to acknowledge, support, and grow the more than book functions that have always been part of library services to some extent, and how to fund that expansion when not seen as something that requires funding, potentially. Yet also then how to preserve their traditional and specific mandate as a library in the eyes of the public as well. So I've written a lot more about these specific tensions in Aotearoa elsewhere. If you have an interest in my findings, please contact me, email me. There'll be more forthcoming as well. I'm trying to write some of that at the moment. So there are definite limits to this usefulness of conceptualizing libraries as social infrastructure. I argue that our broad use of the term may sometimes serve to disregard this ongoing precarity of some of these spaces in the future, and really neglects an engagement with how they're ongoing assembling through the labour of library workers. So when conceptualising the library as a social infrastructure, the ongoing labour, care and maintenance required to allow these functions to occur is often minimised. Hall in particular has criticised what she sees as a depoliticised nature of the concept of social infrastructure. Although she recognises that it illustrates an attempt to locate communities within this big macro frame of infrastructure to emphasise their importance, she thinks this perspective sees the social functions of places like libraries as just an inevitable outcome of the construction of physical infrastructure. She argues that this kind of framing is a simplistic way to conceive of community space, and that it actively disregards the gendered labour and processes of social reproduction that constitute, maintain and sustain these spaces and relations. So Alice Corbell's research on the Library of Birmingham, pictured here, clearly illustrates how a lack of understanding of the work of keeping a library running and a dearth of ongoing public investment culminated in the shrinkage of a new building and library service mere months after its grand opening. So Corbell describes how the investment in the design and the construction of this palatial library was found, but there was never a continuing budget promise that would keep the building, its services, its workers in kind of sustainable, maintainable operation, leading to parts of it being rented out quite quickly and services shrinking within the building that was designed to be a library in its entirety. And heightened engagement with this work of reproducing social infrastructure across time is needed to better contend with their potential survival. Social infrastructural scholarship must reorient itself to acknowledge the distinct temporalities of these spaces, allowing research to truly engage with the precarious futures of these spaces, and the labour required to sustain them. So I don't have specific solutions to offer today, I'm afraid, but I really hope that my unpacking of social infrastructure as a concept for geographers and its limitations, its tactical usefulness and its limitations, can offer a helpful framework to engage with some of these complexities and contradictions in the planning of futures for library services, especially among the myriad expectations placed on the institution today. So I just want to thank you again for inviting me to take part in this conference and listening to my presentation. I'm really disappointed I'm not able to be here live to answer questions, but I'd love to chat about this topic and libraries more generally. If there's anything you want to know, anything you want to chat about, please do email me. I also can't wait to catch up on the other talks in the conference, and I hope it all goes well. Thank you.
Oh, I think I just do that, and hopefully everyone's still here. Right, good. Well, thanks so much, Salene. Fascinating talk there about the evolution from a geographer's perspective of the public library and its role over the last couple of decades. And I think a lot of public librarians might well be able to relate to that kind of tension that she was talking about between the books and the more books roles. So as I mentioned in the chat, do put any comments or questions you have for Salene, and we'll make sure that we pass them on to her. And as she says, she's contactable at that address, email address that she gave. So I think we're just about on time to move on to our third presentation. And this is from Associate Professor Spencer Lilley, and his presentation is titled Connecting with Indigenous Communities. Spencer is an Associate Professor in the Information Studies Programme at in the School of Information Management at Victoria University of Wellington. He has genealogical affiliations to Maori, Samoa and the UK. Prior to commencing his academic and research career, he worked as a library professional for no less than 23 years in special and academic libraries. So I think without further ado, over to you, Spencer, if you can share the screen. Thanks.
It says that it's disabled at the moment.
Oh, really? That's not good. I
Yeah.
wonder if I can. Should I make you a co-host? Maybe I forgot to make you a co-host.
Yes.
Sorry about that, Spencer. Can you see it now? The green button?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. And I will just. Sorry. Right. Oh, sorry. So, thank you. Sorry, I can see that you can see my notes screen rather than.
You might want to put it in PowerPoint mode, Spencer, do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just doing that. Sorry, it's just.
No worries. We got plenty of time.
Is it in the right mode at the moment? It's
Don't not quite. There's
it's just
that's better.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And sorry for that
Actually,
brief technological pitch.
You've actually got two slides there.
Oh, okay. It's sorry. It's my PowerPoint's playing up by the looks of things. sorry, it's
Maybe display settings to one, if you can set that to one slide somehow.
sorry, it's
Maybe screen. Oh, that's it. That's it.
yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened there. Sorry. I'm not normally that technologically in it. But anyway, thank you, Philip, for that introduction. And like Philip and Simon and Salene, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands that both Charles Sturt University occupies, as well as where Te Atiawa and Taranaki Whanui are the mana whenua to Whanganui Atara, which is Wellington, where the Victoria University of Wellington is situated. My presentation today is about building relationships with Indigenous communities. And really the whole point of this presentation is to sort of talk about why you want to build a relationship with Indigenous communities. Sort of, from a lot of my research is around decolonisation and indigenisation of glamour organisations or galleries, libraries, archives, museums and records management institutions. And as part of the research that I've been doing over the last 5 years, a lot of the discussion has been conducted with people where they talk about how they would like to decolonise or indigenise their libraries. And when you actually start to talk to them about why they actually want to do that, they sort of are a bit hesitant to really say they know that it's the right thing to do, but they don't actually know what decolonisation or indigenisation actually involves, and they actually don't know how to go about the process of developing those relationships with the local Indigenous communities. Now, just a word about terminology. One of the aspects of talking about these things is, of course, names. So when I'm talking about Indigenous communities, here in New Zealand, we're talking about Māori, or specifically Māori tribal groups known as iwi. And of course, in Australia, you've got First Nations, you've got Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. You've also got different nations that you refer to. So I'm just using the word Indigenous here as an all-encompassing term, rather than sort of having to use a long acronym or other sort of form of reference. So one of the key things that we need to think about when we want to build a relationship with an Indigenous community is to think about why, how, when, and where. And the where is really important, because part of this is actually knowing about the place that you are currently occupying. Where your library is situated is typically on land that was officially Indigenous land, and possibly was either alienated through illegal or just occupation rights, settler rights that came in from the settlers that came after colonisation. So it's really important to know who the traditional owners of that land are, and know about their history and that relationship to the land on where the library is actually occupying, and how they came about being dispossessed of that land. So it's knowing about their stories, knowing about who they are, how how they may have changed their occupation over time, depending on seasons. All that type of information will help you understand who they are and who you're building your relationship. That is particularly important in terms of looking at how governance now applies to that particular community that you're trying to build that relationship with. So they may have different forms of governance to what you would normally expect, different structures within their tribe. That so they may have a commercial arm, they may have a government arm that reflects the overall management of that particular Indigenous community. So you really need to know who you are working with. Some reason. Oh, here we go. Once you've done that, you need to actually think about who you are. You know, so and identify how those Indigenous communities are already represented within your institution. So it's really a form of a self-audit. And those that have been through various self-audits over the years know that it's all about really picking your organisation apart and actually identifying the bits that are relevant to that type of audit. So you're looking at what collections you have that relate to that Indigenous community. You look at things like the naming conventions that are used in your catalogue or in the signage that you have on the building or in the building or around the building. You look at how they are represented within your website and the social media posts that you use. And when I'd say represented, it's not only about information about them, it's also how they are depicted. So whether in your use of website things, whether you actually have a representation of the different types of people using your institution, or the types of people that are working in your institution, so that they can see that Indigenous people are sort of working or using that particular space. So also looking at the type of artwork that you have within your building, looking at the types of services that are offered that might be particularly focused or offered that towards Indigenous services. Also looking at who works in your organisation. Now, in a lot of larger systems, it's quite possible that you have people within your organisation that you don't realise are actually Indigenous. And I've found this through various surveys that I have done over the last few years, where I have asked, you know, sort of, have you got Māori staff working in your institution? And it was surprising the numbers that either said don't know, or tick the non-applicable box, but then later on in another part of the survey indicated that they thought that there might be someone, but they couldn't actually sort of quantify the numbers or what particular skills they had or what particular iwi those people belong to. It's also about identifying staff who may have Indigenous language skills and sort of identifying again which Indigenous language that is and their degree of ability. Most of all, it's about knowing who you are culturally and how you relate to the place that you currently occupy. Now, for the Indigenous people, we relate to, in New Zealand, to our mountain, our river, or body of water, to the hapu that we come from, which is the sub-tribe, our tribe, our ancestral waka or canoe. So actually thinking about those from a non-Indigenous point of view, sort of thinking about your background, what you've learned about Indigenous culture, about how your library may have contributed to part of that colonisation process, how your education has affected your particular perspective on Indigenous issues. So it's that whole part about locating who you are and how that relates to the Indigenous population you're trying to build a relationship with. Now, seeking guidance. Again, this is very much a common sense type approach. Finding out who you can contact in the community. So using your network of contacts that you already have to find out who may be the appropriate people for you to contact to start this relationship with. If you're within a public library system that is part of a local government council, you're likely to have liaison officers within your organisation that are already working with that particular community. And if they are, they may be able to put you in touch with the right people, which could be the administrative office of that particular community, who can then help you arrange access to the community that you wish to be building a relationship with. Now, it's not just about going to that place and finding that you want to meet with them. One of the key things about being in a relationship is that you have to be involved in that relationship. So in Māori culture, we call it kānohi tutia, which is being seen. So that means that you have to be out there, you have to be seen in the community, you have to be contributing to the community. And it means that going to their events, whether those are celebrations, whether they are funerals, whether they are market stalls, etc. So you need to sort of be seen out there in the community as being wanting to be part of that community, and that you're not just there as a fair weather community member when it suits you. What is actually required here, though, is that it's not just your liaison staff that should be doing this. It should be involving people from right across the organisation, from the leadership down to people that are sort of everyday librarians and library assistants. And it shouldn't just be the Indigenous staff that are going out and mixing in these communities in that way. Because part of this is, if you're going to have a relationship, you want it to be a long-term relationship, and as part of that, it's succession planning. So that as one person drops off or leaves an organisation, there are other people that are there to continue to maintain that relationship and keep the fire alight. The whole thing about having a formal meeting is to understand that they're not sitting around waiting for you to turn up and have a meeting with them. They haven't been waiting all these years for the library to finally realise that they need to meet and build a relationship. So you're not necessarily going to be their top priority when it comes to developing the meeting schedules. So you may be scheduled to go and talk to them, and something else might come up. As I said earlier, there's a lot of time that is where things happen at the last minute, and that it's going to mean that there is going to have to be some flexibility required on the part of the library before you actually get to meet with them. Now, who you actually meet with may not necessarily be who you expect to meet with. So again, that flexibility is required. It may take some time for you actually to meet with people that have decision-making powers or have the ear of the rest of the community. The other thing here too is that you need to go in with an open mind. Don't have an agenda that you want to talk to. It's a matter of introducing not only yourself, but your institution and all that work that you've done around the cultural self-audit and the due diligence that you have done about their experiences on that land will be helpful, but you need to be listening to them because their account of those experiences is probably going to be quite different to what you've been able to find out yourself. So as part of that, you may find that the whole experience is quite sort of daunting because there will be criticism, cynicism, hostility coming from them about various aspects of their experiences that they will share with you. The criticism might be about why you've used Indigenous names but not the right Indigenous names, cynicism as to well, what do you want from us and what do you expect from us? And the hostility might just be hostility about some of the issues to do with the disposition of having actually taken some action themselves that they were rebuffed. As I say, listening is probably the most important aspect here because it is going to help you decide on a pathway ahead. And as part of that, it's important not to overpromise because I think too many promises have been made to Indigenous peoples over the years that have not been kept. Do not become another statistic in that sense. Another part of building those relationships is actually once you've been out there in the community, once you've met with the elders and other community leaders, it's a chance to try and bring that Indigenous community into the building. And as part of that, I think this is part of the process of building that relationship is actually identifying a way of doing that, which makes it safe for those people to come. And you know, one suggestion that I often make to people is there an occasion that you can sort of put on in your library that will be able to, where you will be able to invite the local community to come in and experience not only your hospitality, but also see what the library can actually do for them. And you know, so over here we have Matariki, which is the Māori New Year, which has just recently happened. We have Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, which is Māori Language Week, which happens in September. We have Waitangi Day in February. In Australia, I guess you have NAIDOC Week. So it could be something like NAIDOC Week if you're in Australia, where you could hold an event in the library. Always follow the correct protocols of how to invite them. You know, get that advice from people within that community. Follow the correct protocol when they come. in terms of any sort of cultural aspects that you want to sort of ensure happen. And one of the great things about this is that you get people that have lived in that locality their lives, but have never been into the library before coming in, and actually understanding that the library is there for everyone. And part of that, you can help organise informal tours on the night or during the day, organise membership for them, and actually introduce them to the staff, so that they should probably already know the staff from the sort of community activities that have already been taking place, but to actually come in and see who the staff are and where they fit into the organisation can then encourage them to come back and become better users of the library. There's also opportunities here for looking at how you can get Indigenous representation on governance groups, or helping senior leaders or the library in general developing its strategic goals in relation to local and Indigenous issues. And as part of that, you can begin those discussions about what they want to see from the library over shorter and longer terms. So it may be decolonisation or indigenisation. It may be discussing digitisation projects, preservation of various Indigenous treasures. Or it could be looking at the opportunities for skills development, particularly in the information literacy, digital literacy areas. And as part of this relationship building process, you have an opportunity to promote employment opportunities to that community, so that you actually, by being involved in the community, you can encourage people to actually come and work in your library. And as part of that, you should not be putting additional loads onto that people, but people relate to people that they can that they know, and that's one way of building your capacity. Finally, it's about also reviewing. As I said earlier, you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So there needs to be an ongoing revision and review of the relationship. And that may sort of be within each organisation and between organisations. There needs to be feedback mechanisms about satisfaction and meaningful feedback. I'm going to say one of the problems that we have in New Zealand is that if you ask someone personally how they, what they think of something, they'll say something, oh, how high, which basically means it's fine. But yeah, actually, like the good old reference question, you have to get a bit deeper into the conversation to actually get them to sort of tell you what they really think. Part of that is identifying changes to policy, and that may be to do with digitisation or reparation or other repatriation, not reparation, forms of work. And finally, looking for new opportunities for collaboration between the groups. So, like all relationships, you will have your ups, you will have your downs. What you don't want to have, though, is a separation. And that unfortunately can happen. So you have to work hard at these types of relationships. And sort of really, it comes back to, sort of why you want to build this relationship from an Indigenous perspective. It's about nothing on us or about us without us. So, if you're going to be talking about us, or doing things about us, we have to be involved. So thank you, and hopefully that wasn't too much of a hurry through.
Perfect, Spencer, just in time. So yeah, thanks so much for that presentation. Lots of great advice there, great practical advice for us to think about in terms of connecting to our Indigenous communities. So we don't have much time left for questions. Jan Richards put in a comment, and yeah, I think most people would put in similar kinds of comments about the usefulness of those suggestions. So thanks so much, Spence. I don't think got any other particular questions, and we're about on time. So thanks again to all our three presenters. Completely different presentations, but all very, very relevant to public libraries, and lots of food for thought there. So thanks, Africa, Salene, and Spencer. I will probably stop recording.